For 500 years, one man at a time ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen. They were called gods. They were called saviors. They were called the most powerful men alive. But every single one of them had a moment where the mask slipped, where the marble cracked, where the man behind the crown did something so cruel, so paranoid, or so insane that history has never stopped whispering about it. A father who killed his own daughter's future to protect his image. An emperor who watched Rome burn and blamed an entire religion. A ruler captured alive and forced to kneel as a human footstool. A boy emperor who lost everything before he could even grow a beard. This is every Roman emperor's darkest moment. From the founding of the empire to the day it fell. 500 years, 70 rulers, one unbroken chain of ambition, blood, and betrayal. Let's begin where it all started, with the man who built Rome's greatest lie. Rome had just clawed its way out of a century of civil war. The Republic was dead, and one man stood on top of the ashes, Augustus, the first emperor, the architect of an empire that would last half a millennium. He's remembered as the Golden Founder, the reformer, the man who brought peace. But Augustus understood something that every emperor after him would learn the hard way. Power has a price, and sometimes you pay it with the people you love most. Augustus built his entire political identity on one idea: Rome's moral revival. He passed strict laws against adultery. He preached family values. He positioned himself as the father of the nation, literally. His title was Pater Patriae, and then his daughter Julia became the one thing his empire couldn't tolerate. Brilliant, witty, rebellious, she lived openly, scandalously, on her own terms. When rumors of her affairs reached Augustus, he had a choice: protect his daughter, or protect the lie. He chose the lie. He exiled her to a tiny island called Pandateria. No wine, no men, no visitors without his permission. She never saw Rome again. She died of starvation, some say deliberately, after Augustus cut off her allowance in his will. The man who rebuilt Rome couldn't save his own family. Or wouldn't. That's the darkest part. Augustus proved something terrifying, that in the new Rome, even blood was cheaper than image. Augustus's successor, Tiberius, was a competent general and an exhausted man. He never wanted to be emperor. And the longer he sat on the throne, the more he hated it. So he left. He packed up, sailed to the island of Capri, and refused to come back. But an empire doesn't stop needing a ruler just because the ruler doesn't want to rule. And from his island villa, Tiberius's paranoia metastasized. He empowered a man named Sejanus, captain of the Praetorian Guard, to run Rome in his name. What followed was the first true police state in European history. Treason trials became a weapon. An accusation was a death sentence. Families turned on each other. Senators were executed for a wrong word, a wrong look, a wrong friendship. Tiberius ruled an empire he never saw, through fear he never witnessed. The ancient historian Tacitus describes Capri in those years as something out of a nightmare, a place of cruelty, secrecy, and rumor. Tiberius died there at 77, still refusing to come home. He taught every emperor after him a lesson. You don't need to be in the room to make people afraid. You just need them to believe you might be watching. Then came Caligula. And with him, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. He started popular, young, charismatic, the son of a war hero. Rome cheered when he took the throne. Then he got sick. And when he recovered, something in him had changed. Or maybe something had always been there, waiting. Caligula didn't just want to be emperor. He wanted to be worshipped. He declared himself a living god. He ordered his statue placed in temples across the empire, including, disastrously, the temple in Jerusalem. He humiliated the Senate for sport. He allegedly made his horse a priest and planned to make him a consul. Whether that last one actually happened or was political satire, the fact that Romans believed it tells you everything. He turned the empire into a stage and himself into the only actor. Rome stopped being a government and became a performance piece for one man's ego. It lasted less than 4 years. His own guards, the men sworn to protect him, cornered him in a tunnel and stabbed him to death. He was 28. Rome barely mourned. And then there's Nero. In July of 64 CE, a fire broke out near the Circus Maximus. It spread fast. Wooden buildings, narrow streets, summer winds. For 6 days and 7 nights, the heart of Rome burned. When it finally ended, 10 of the city's 14 districts were damaged or destroyed. Thousands were dead. Hundreds of thousands were homeless. Nero needed someone to blame, because the rumors had already started that he had wanted a fire, that he had a new palace to build, that he watched from a high tower playing music while the city burned. So he picked a target. A new religious group nobody understood. Christians. What followed was one of the first recorded mass persecutions in Western history. Christians were crucified, thrown to dogs, covered in tar and lit on fire to illuminate Nero's garden parties. The historian Tacitus, no friend of Christians, called it so cruel that even Romans began to feel pity for them. Nero didn't just burn Rome, he burned Rome's conscience. And 4 years later, abandoned by everyone, he killed himself. His reported last words? "What an artist dies in me." The Julio-Claudian dynasty, the founding family of the empire, ended with a suicide in a borrowed villa. And Rome was about to tear itself apart. Nero left no heir. So Rome did what Rome had forgotten how to do. It fought over the throne. In a single year, 4 different men wore the purple. Galba, an old, stingy general who alienated the Praetorian Guard within weeks. He refused to pay the bribe they expected. They dragged him into the forum and butchered him. His head was carried through the streets on a spear. Otho, a former friend of Nero. He lasted 3 months. When his army lost a decisive battle, he killed himself rather than drag Rome through more bloodshed. It's almost the only decent thing anyone did that year. Vitellius, a gluttonous, indulgent emperor who reportedly threw feast after feast while his legions fell apart around him. When rival troops took the city, he was found hiding in the palace. They dragged him through Rome, tortured him publicly, and threw his body in the Tiber. The darkest moment of 69 CE wasn't any single death. It was the revelation. Rome learned that the throne wasn't sacred. It wasn't divine. It was just a chair, and whoever had the biggest army could sit in it. That lesson would haunt the empire for the next 400 years. After the chaos came the Golden Age. The so-called 5 good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius. Rome reached its greatest extent, its wealthiest peak, its most stable century. But even in gold, there's blood underneath. Trajan is often called Rome's greatest emperor, a brilliant general, a fair ruler, a man the Senate loved so much that for centuries every new emperor was wished to be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan. But ask the Dacians about Trajan. Dacia, modern-day Romania, was rich in gold. Trajan wanted that gold, so he went to war. Twice. The second campaign wasn't a conquest. It was an erasure. Entire populations were killed, enslaved, or displaced. Villages were burned. The Dacian king, Decebalus, cut his own throat rather than be paraded through Rome. Trajan commemorated the slaughter with a 100-foot column in the center of Rome, Trajan's Column, which still stands today. It shows the campaign in exquisite detail. Soldiers marching, cities burning, prisoners executed, women and children led away in chains. Rome called it a triumph. The Dacians called it an ending. Some historians estimate the genocide was so complete that it fundamentally rewrote the population of an entire region. Rome at its best was still Rome, and Rome at its best could still erase you from history. Marcus Aurelius is the philosopher king, the Stoic, the author of the Meditations, one of the most quoted books in Western history. He's the emperor everyone wants to believe in. His darkest moment wasn't something he did, it was something he couldn't stop. Around 165 CE, Roman soldiers returning from the east brought back a disease. Historians still argue about what it was: smallpox, measles, something worse. What we know is the result. For 15 years, it killed. Estimates range from 5 to 10 million dead. In some regions, a third of the population was gone. Marcus Aurelius, the wisest man to ever wear the crown, wrote his philosophy while his empire was dying around him. He watched soldiers drop on the frontier. He watched cities empty. He wrote about acceptance and impermanence because he had no other choice. The plague didn't just kill people, it killed the idea that Rome was invincible. After Marcus, the empire never fully recovered. And when he died in 180 CE, he left the throne to the one person who would prove that Rome's golden age was over: his son. Commodus inherited the greatest empire in history, and he decided to use it to put on a show. He fought in the Colosseum as a gladiator, the emperor of Rome, covered in sand and blood, killing wounded animals, facing rigged opponents who were forbidden to actually hurt him. He dressed as Hercules. He renamed the months of the year after himself. He renamed Rome itself, called it Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. The Senate watched in horror. The darkest moment wasn't one fight, it was what he represented. The emperor wasn't a statesman anymore. He wasn't even a soldier. He was entertainment. The dignity of the office was gone, and with it, any remaining illusion that Rome was ruled by reason. His own inner circle poisoned him. When the poison didn't work fast enough, they sent his personal wrestling coach to strangle him in the bath. He was 31. If Commodus was a clown with a sword, Caracalla was something worse. A calculating killer who smiled while he did it. He murdered his own brother, Geta, in their mother's arms, literally, to take sole power. He executed thousands of Geta's supporters afterward. A systematic purge. But his darkest moment was Alexandria, 215 CE. The city had made jokes about him. Satirical plays. Whispers in the streets. Caracalla invited the young men of Alexandria to meet him. A ceremonial gathering, supposedly to enlist them in the army. When they arrived, he had his soldiers slaughter them. The killing spread beyond the gathering. His men moved through the city for days, killing civilians, looting homes, burning neighborhoods. Nobody knows the final death toll. Ancient sources say tens of thousands. Modern historians think it may have been even higher. His own bodyguard killed him on the side of a road 2 years later. He was stabbed while urinating. An undignified end for a man who had made cruelty into policy. From 235 to 284 CE, 50 years, Rome had over 50 emperors. Let that number sink in. Most were assassinated. Most lasted months. The army made and unmade rulers like it was changing shirts. Whoever the legions declared was emperor, until the next legion declared someone else and killed the last one. The economy collapsed. The currency was debased so badly that a silver coin became almost pure copper. Cities built walls for the first time in centuries. Plague returned. The Persians invaded the east. Germanic tribes invaded the north. The empire briefly split into 3 pieces. Rome nearly died. Not metaphorically. Actually died. And in the middle of this carnival of collapse, one emperor's fate stood out even among all the horror. In 260 CE, Emperor Valerian marched east to fight the Persian king Shapur I. He lost. And then something happened that had never happened before in 500 years of Roman history. He was captured, alive. What followed became legend. According to Persian sources, and some Roman ones, Shapur used Valerian as a human footstool. Every time the Persian king wanted to mount his horse, the Roman emperor was forced to kneel. Shapur stepped on his back to climb up. Some accounts say Valerian was eventually flayed alive, his skin stuffed with straw and displayed in a Persian temple for generations. Whatever the exact truth, the symbolism was devastating. The master of the Roman world, a man descended from a line of gods, according to Roman propaganda, was a piece of furniture for a foreign king. Rome never forgot. And Rome was never the same. Rome needed a dictator to survive. It got one. Diocletian saved the empire. That's not an exaggeration. He split the empire into 4 administrative zones. He reformed the economy. He rebuilt the army. He brought order back to a world that had forgotten what order felt like. And then, near the end of his reign, he did something that would define him forever. In 303 CE, he launched the Great Persecution, the largest, most systematic attempt to destroy Christianity in Roman history. Churches were burned. Scriptures confiscated. Christians were forced to sacrifice to Roman gods or die. Those who refused were tortured, burned, fed to wild animals. It went on for years. And here's the dark irony. It didn't work. Christianity survived. It grew. And within a generation, the religion Diocletian tried to erase would become the official faith of the empire itself. His darkest moment was also his most revealing one. It wasn't the act of a confident ruler. It was the desperation of a man trying to hold together something that didn't want to be held. Constantine is remembered as the savior of Christianity, the emperor who converted, who made the cross the symbol of the empire, who founded Constantinople, who presided over the Council of Nicaea. He's also the emperor who executed his own son and his own wife. In 326 CE, Constantine ordered the death of his eldest son, Crispus C., a decorated young general beloved by the army. No trial, no public charge, just gone. Months later, his wife Fausta was killed too. Some sources say she was locked in an overheated bath until she died. Some say she was denounced as a liar. Some say she and Crispus were accused of an affair. Some say Fausta accused Crispus falsely, and Constantine killed both when he realized the truth. We don't actually know what happened. Constantine made sure of that. He scrubbed it from the official record. Ancient historians refer to it in hints and whispers. The savior of Rome, the first Christian emperor, the man who presided over a council to define the nature of God. And he killed his firstborn and his wife and buried the story under imperial silence. Even saints had darkness. Even saviors had blood on their hands. By the end of the 4th century, the empire was split permanently, east and west. The east would survive for another 1,000 years as Byzantium. The west had less than a century left. Honorius was the Western emperor when Rome was sacked in 410 CE, the first time the city had fallen to a foreign enemy in 800 years. The Visigoths under Alaric poured through the gates. They looted for 3 days. Churches, palaces, homes. The city that had ruled the world was ransacked by people Rome had once dismissed as barbarians. And where was Honorius? Safe in Ravenna, 200 miles away. When a servant ran into his chambers and told him, "Rome has perished," Honorius reportedly became distraught because he had a pet chicken named Roma, and he thought the bird had died. When the servant clarified that no, it was the city, Honorius was relieved. His chicken was fine. The story might be apocryphal, but it spread because it felt true. The Western Empire was being run by a man who cared more about a pet than the capital of civilization. The city survived. The empire did not. The last Roman emperor in the West was a teenager. His name was Romulus Augustulus, a cruel joke of a name, combining the founder of Rome, Romulus, with the first emperor, Augustus, and the diminutive Ulus, meaning little Romulus, little Augustus. He was 16 years old, a puppet installed by his father. He ruled for 10 months. In 476 CE, a Germanic general named Odoacer walked into the palace, deposed him, and declared himself king of Italy. There was no battle for Rome, no last stand, no dramatic final speech. Odoacer sent the boy into retirement with a pension and told him to stay out of trouble. That's how Western Rome ended. Not with an army at the gates, not with fire in the forum, with a teenager being quietly walked out of a palace and told to go home. For 500 years, the world had been ruled by men who called themselves gods. And it ended with a boy nobody bothered to kill. Every emperor had a darkest moment. Some were acts of cruelty. Some were failures of character. Some were just the weight of an empire too heavy for any one man to carry. But put them all together, and you see something bigger than any single ruler. You see the real story of Rome, not marble and laurels and noble speeches, but a 500-year experiment in what happens when you give one man absolute power and tell him he's divine. The emperors changed. The crimes changed. The faces on the coins changed. The pattern never did. If you made it this far, and if you're enjoying the content, please hit the subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for watching.